have just one question for you. How many of Epstein's co-conspirators have you indicted? How many perpetrators are you even investigating?
This administration released over 3 million pages of documents, over 3 million, and Donald Trump signed that law to release all of those documents. He is the most transparent president in the nation's history. And none of them asked Merrick Garland over the last 4 years one word about Jeffrey Epstein. How ironic is that? You know why? Because Donald Trump, the Dow right now is over $50,000. I don't know why you're laughing.
The DOJ is not collaborating with state and local law enforcement on these homicides. So I really think that is a disgraceful approach to the homicides of American citizens, and really does nothing to bring credit to your department. And, Mr. Chairman, I would yield back.
Gentlelady yields back.
May I answer?
Attorney General can respond.
I find it interesting that she keeps going after President Trump, the greatest president in American history.
You could feel the room tighten the moment that answer landed, because it was so bizarre, so disconnected, it almost sounded unreal. Pam Bondi was asked a simple, direct question. Why hasn't she investigated any of Epstein's alleged co-conspirators? That is not a complicated question. It does not require a detour. It does not require a speech. And yet somehow, instead of giving the country a clear answer, she veered into talking points about the Dow being over 5,000. Seriously, what are we even doing here? Since when does a strong stock market become a substitute for accountability? Since when do rising numbers on Wall Street excuse unanswered questions about elite criminal networks? And that is the part that should stop every American cold. This is the Attorney General of the United States. This is supposed to be the person entrusted with sober judgment, legal independence, and the courage to confront powerful people, not someone tossing out random campaign-style applause lines like a political auto-response machine. The office is supposed to stand apart from the president, apart from partisan pressure, apart from the need to perform. But watching that hearing, it did not look like independence. It looked like loyalty theater. And it got worse. When she was pressed over her department's handling of the killings of U.S. citizens Renee Good and Alex Prey, again, a serious matter with real human consequences, the pattern repeated itself. More deflection, more redirection, more refusal to engage the substance. So at some point, the question becomes unavoidable. Is this incompetence? Is this deliberate strategy? Or is this what happens when political messaging completely overtakes the job itself? Because whatever this was, it did not look anything like the standard the country should expect from its top law enforcement official. And then came the question that should have cut through every excuse in the room. Clear, direct, and impossible to dismiss. Was the DOJ refusing to work with local law enforcement to investigate the deaths of 2 American citizens? That is not some partisan gotcha. That is the kind of question that goes straight to the core of duty, conscience, and public trust for anyone serving as Attorney General. So how did Pam Bondi respond? She pivoted almost instantly into praising Donald Trump as the greatest president in American history. And then, as if that were not strange enough, she tossed in that the Dow was soaring. Just sit with that for a second. The head of the United States Department of Justice was asked about investigating the deaths of American citizens, and her response was essentially, Trump is great, and the stock market is doing well. It was one of the most surreal moments of the entire hearing. She did not sound like the nation's chief law enforcement officer. She sounded like a political bot stuck in a loop, firing off applause lines and empty flattery the second a serious question got too close. And that is what made it so jarring. Try to imagine Merrick Garland doing that. Try to imagine Bill Barr, who was hardly hostile to Trump, answering a serious oversight question by blurting out that the president is the greatest ever and, by the way, check the Dow. It would be unthinkable, because that is not how an attorney general is expected to behave. That is how a campaign surrogate behaves. And the deeper this hearing went, the more that pattern hardened. Every time she faced a serious question about her actual responsibilities, investigating crimes, delivering justice, answering for the deaths of American citizens, she either snapped at the person asking or drifted into lavish praise of her boss. She was not speaking like the chief law enforcement officer of the United States. She was speaking like a starstruck loyalist. And that is exactly why so many Americans walked away from this hearing not just frustrated, but genuinely alarmed about what is happening to public faith in American justice right now. Donald Trump attended various parties with Jeffrey.
To the survivors in the room, if you are willing, please stand. And if you are willing, please raise your hands if you have still not been able to meet with this Department of Justice. Please know for the record that every single survivor has raised their hand. Will you turn to the survivors? This is not about anybody that came before you. It is about you taking responsibility for your Department of Justice and the harm that it has done to the survivors who are standing right behind you and are waiting for you to turn to them and apologize for what your Department of Justice has done.
Members get to ask the questions. The witness gets to answer in the way they want to answer. The Attorney General can
That's
respond.
not accurate, Mr. Chairman.
Because she
It
doesn't
is
like the
my
answer.
time.
So,
Mr. Chairman,
why
I have asked
didn't she ask Merrick Garland this?
I am
twice
reclaiming
when
my
he sat in my
time, and
chair?
when I
will
reclaim my
continue to
time,
answer.
it
Mr.
is
Chairman, the
my
gentlelady's
I'm
reclaimed her
not going
time.
to get in the gutter for her theatrics.
The time belongs to the gentlelady. The gentlelady has 17 seconds.
Thank you. You're not going to answer this question, so let me just
Chairman,
say
I'll
this.
direct it to
What a
you.
massive
No, I'm
cover-up.
answering a
Mr.
question.
Chairman, will you
Chairman.
restore her time? The witness
I'm
is
not going to get in
interrupting.
the gutter with this woman.
Stop the
She's
time
doing
and
theatrics.
let me
Let's say the quiet part out loud, because too many people act like even asking the question is somehow out of bounds. It is not outrageous to ask whether the sitting president of the United States ever attended parties with a known sexual predator where underage girls were present. That is not a wild question. That is a legitimate question. It is a basic question of public interest, accountability, and truth. And if the answer were truly no, then saying it should have been effortless. One word, 2 letters. No. Simple, clean, final. But that is not what happened. And that alone raised the temperature in the room. Still, what made the moment feel even darker was not just the refusal to give a direct answer. It was what happened around that refusal. Because when she had a clear chance to show even the bare minimum of decency, to acknowledge the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse, who were seated right behind her in that hearing room, she did not do it. She stayed silent. She did not turn toward them. She did not recognize them. She did not use that moment to show empathy, seriousness, or moral clarity. She looked past them. And that choice told its own story. It was not just evasive. It came off cold. It came off tone-deaf. And it revealed something far more unsettling than a bad answer. It suggested that even in a room where the victims were physically present, the instinct was still to protect the politics of the moment, rather than confront the human reality sitting right there in plain sight.
Do the right thing, Attorney General. Meet with the survivors. They have been asking for a year. Meet with the survivors. Do the right thing. I yield back.
I was curious if you, Congresswoman, asked Bill Clinton that. Didn't see one tweet, not one. I didn't see one tweet when Joe Biden was in office about Bill Clinton. Didn't ask Merrick Garland anything about Epstein, not once when he was.
Weak sauce.
And also, I want the record to reflect that, with this anti-Semitic culture right now, she voted against a resolution condemning.
Oh,
he
is
Jewish.
I
just want to be clear.
Do you want to go there, Attorney General? Or do you want to go there? Are you serious? Talking about anti-Semitism to a woman who lost her grandfather in the Holocaust?
And then came the question that should have cut through every excuse in the room. Clear, direct, and impossible to dismiss. Was the DOJ refusing to work with local law enforcement to investigate the deaths of 2 American citizens? That is not some partisan gotcha. That is the kind of question that goes straight to the core of duty, conscience, and public trust for anyone serving as Attorney General. So how did Pam Bondi respond? She pivoted almost instantly into praising Donald Trump as the greatest president in American history. And then, as if that were not strange enough, she tossed in that the Dow was soaring. Just sit with that for a second. The head of the United States Department of Justice was asked about investigating the deaths of American citizens, and her response was essentially, "Trump is great, and the stock market is doing well." It was one of the most surreal moments of the entire hearing. She did not sound like the nation's chief law enforcement officer. She sounded like a political bot stuck in a loop, firing off applause lines and empty flattery the second a serious question got too close. And that is what made it so jarring. Try to imagine Merrick Garland doing that. Try to imagine Bill Barr, who was hardly hostile to Trump, answering a serious oversight question by blurting out that the president is the greatest ever and, by the way, check the Dow. It would be unthinkable because that is not how an attorney general is expected to behave. That is how a campaign surrogate behaves. And the deeper this hearing went, the more that pattern hardened. Every time she faced a serious question about her actual responsibilities, investigating crimes, delivering justice, answering for the deaths of American citizens, she either snapped at the person asking or drifted into lavish praise of her boss. She was not speaking like the chief law enforcement officer of the United States. She was speaking like a starstruck loyalist. And that is exactly why so many Americans walked away from this hearing not just frustrated, but genuinely alarmed about what is happening to public faith in American justice right now. Donald Trump attended various parties with Jeffrey.
This guy has Trump derangement syndrome. He needs to get, you're a failed politician.
Not a complicated question.
Well, I guess it is for you because you have a law degree and those are privileged. Do you even know who Chase Mulligan is? You're so obsessed with, you don't, do you?
I'm going to teach you the rules again.
Have you apologized to President Trump? Have you apologized to President Trump, all of you who participated in those impeachment hearings against Donald Trump? Nothing about helping crime in her district. She's not even worth getting into the details. Excuse me, I'm going to answer the question.
Answer my question.
No, I'm going to answer the question the way I want to answer the question.
No,
And I told you about that, Attorney General, before you started.
You don't tell me
Yeah, oh, I
anything,
did tell you because we saw what you did in the Senate.
You're a lawyer, not even a lawyer.
Arlen,
You don't get to reclaim
because
time
this
when
is
you don't.
bigger than Watergate.
When I don't answer a question the way you
goes
want.
over.
Only 2 people voted against it, and you were one of them, hypocrite.
But we're going to move back to you.
I bet we are.
Yes, of course, because you're here to testify.
Yes, you heard that correctly. Congresswoman Becca Balint, whose family history includes losing her grandfather in the Holocaust, was met not with seriousness, not with empathy, and not with any visible willingness to engage the pain in that room, but with an accusation of anti-Semitism from Pam Bondi after Balint pushed for a meeting with Jeffrey Epstein's survivors. Just think about how staggering that moment was. Not because it was merely offensive, but because it felt so wildly out of proportion to what was actually being asked. And the reason it hit so hard is that it did not feel isolated. It felt like part of a broader pattern that kept surfacing throughout the hearing. Every time the pressure rose, every time the questions became sharper, every time the hearing moved closer to accountability, Bondi seemed to fall back on the same instincts: hostility, personal attack, and an almost reflexive attempt to bully her way through the moment. That is what made the performance so revealing. It raised the question of whether she was simply unprepared, completely overwhelmed, or sitting in that chair without credible answers to begin with. Because instead of projecting command, discipline, or seriousness, she repeatedly came across like someone running on attitude and aggression alone, like an over-caffeinated mean girl trying to win a fight in the comments section, rather than the Attorney General of the United States trying to answer for matters of justice. And once that image locks into the audience's mind, it is very hard to shake. What happened in that hearing did not feel like oversight functioning the way it should. It felt like a slow, public unraveling of dignity inside the highest law enforcement office in the country. Pam Bondi did not come across as someone defending justice. She came across as someone defending a man. She did not center victims. She centered stock numbers, slogans, and political loyalty. When survivors sat behind her hoping, at the very least, to be acknowledged, she turned away. When she was asked about dead American citizens, she answered with the Dow. When basic accountability came knocking, she reached for personal attacks and Holocaust-era smears instead of clarity. And that is the bigger story here. This was not strength. It was not leadership. It was not composure under pressure. It was a spectacle of arrogance, evasion, and partisan performance from someone occupying one of the most consequential jobs in American public life. The United States deserves better than an attorney general who appears to operate like a combative campaign surrogate. The country deserves a Department of Justice that serves the law, serves the public, and serves the truth, not the ego of one political figure. And if this hearing left you disgusted, it should. Because moments like this only get normalized when the public shrugs and moves on. So do not move on. Demand answers. Demand accountability. Demand that Jeffrey Epstein's survivors are treated like human beings whose pain matters. Share it. Call it out. Keep the pressure on. Because silence protects power, and the American people saw far too much in that room to pretend they did not.